They blocked him from boarding, scrutinized his ticket, and called for backup, all while ignoring the fact that he held the keys to a $48 million contract with their airline. There was nothing unusual about Marcus Jennings that morning. His suit was immaculate, his tie knotted perfectly, and he moved through JFK Terminal 4 like someone accustomed to early flights and long board meetings. In his left hand he carried a sleek leather briefcase, and in his right a first-class boarding pass bound for San Francisco. Marcus was flying out for the Global Agro-Sustainability Summit, where at 63 he was scheduled to deliver the keynote address. He had done this routine far too many times to require any extra fanfare. He wasn't a man seeking attention. He preferred efficiency and quiet determination. But that morning, something changed as soon as he reached Gate 21. The boarding line hadn't yet formed. A few travelers stood nearby, sipping coffee and scrolling on their devices. Marcus walked up to the gate desk with measured calm, offered a polite nod to the young woman stationed there, and handed her his boarding pass. Instead of promptly scanning it, she paused, looking up at him and then back again, her gaze lingering uncertainly, as if she were trying to decide whether to speak or stall. Marcus waited with serene composure. "This lane is for premium passengers only," she finally said in a tone that was sharper than the situation warranted. "I know," Marcus replied evenly. She blinked, scanned his boarding pass slowly, and then her hand hovered over the scanner without clicking. After a moment, she looked back at him and then toward a colleague off to the side, whispering something that prompted her companion to lean in as well. Marcus didn't flinch. "I'm going to need to see some ID," she insisted. He tilted his head just slightly, remarking, "You don't typically ask for ID when scanning a pass. Is something wrong?" She hesitated, replying, "It's just a security measure." There was no airline policy requiring an ID check at this gate. Both of them knew it. With quiet precision, Marcus pulled his wallet from his inside jacket pocket and handed over his driver's license. The agent held it uncertainly, as though unsure what to do with it, then placed it awkwardly on the desk without scanning. "Please wait here for a moment," she said. Marcus glanced down at his boarding pass, noting that his name was printed clearly as Marcus Jennings. He said nothing. The gate agent walked a few steps away and murmured again, this time to a colleague in a dark uniform. Within moments, a security officer was approaching. Marcus had encountered situations like this before, not often, but enough to recognize the familiar switch from routine professionalism to unwarranted suspicion, as though suddenly someone decided he didn't belong, simply because they couldn't fit. Someone like him in first class. The security officer stood beside Marcus without a word, his eyes appraising him as if running a mental risk assessment. Still calm, Marcus stepped aside from the boarding lane. He wasn't going to raise his voice or argue. He wasn't interested in giving them the kind of confrontation they seemed to expect. Instead, he reached into his pocket, pulled out his phone, and made a single call. It rang once, twice, and then a familiar voice answered. "Hey, it's me, Tara. I need you to pull up the catering contract we signed with Skylink Air 2 weeks ago." "Yes, the one covering their West Coast routes. I'm at JFK Gate 21 now." "Hold on." Marcus stayed on the line, eyes fixed straight ahead. No emotion, no hint of frustration. The gate agent glanced over, and realizing he was still there, leaned into the desk's microphone to announce to the growing line of passengers We're just working through a minor issue. Thank you for your patience." A businessman in a gray pullover leaned forward and whispered, "Is he causing trouble or something?" Marcus heard him, but he didn't turn around. Tara's voice came back on the line. "Got it. Do you need me to call corporate?" "No," he said softly. "Just flag it. I think they're about to realize there's a problem." He hung up and slipped the phone back into his pocket, while still holding his boarding pass. He stood quietly, as if waiting for an elevator. Yet that call wasn't a complaint, it was a warning. A subtle reminder that Marcus Jennings wasn't known for flashy displays. He didn't always wear tailored suits or travel first class. Marcus had grown up in Springfield, Ohio, in a modest home with creaky wooden floors and noisy mornings. His mother, Darlene, worked long shifts stocking produce at the local grocer, while his father, Eugene, alternated between night shifts at the factory and weekend odd jobs. They didn't have much, but there was always food on the table, and early on, Marcus learned that the way you carry yourself counts. At 15, he'd been up at 5 a.m. on Saturdays, helping his mother sort through crates of fresh fruits and vegetables before the store opened. It was in that humble setting he learned to distinguish a perfectly ripe apple from one past its prime, and most importantly, how to speak with people, listening and engaging, not talking at them. By 23, Marcus had graduated from Ohio State with a degree in agricultural business and exactly $500 in his pocket. His first venture was a modest produce stand on the outskirts of Columbus. With no employees, just a borrowed truck, a small tent, and determination, he sold sweet corn as if it were liquid gold. The real transformation came in his early 30s, when he recognized a gap in the market for sustainably sourced, regionally grown produce that could scale without sacrificing quality. Not a boutique or farmer's market operation, but real food for modern retailers. Jennings Global Provisions was born in a rented garage with a single delivery route and a computer that crashed more often than not. By forging direct relationships with Midwestern farms, he gradually built a network that, over nearly 15 years, earned his company a seat at the table with national suppliers. Today, Jennings Global Provision supplies over 30 upscale grocery chains, several university systems, and most notably, Skylink Air, the airline that had unexpectedly chosen him to revamp their in-flight meal service after a string of poor reviews. Despite his monumental success, Marcus never let it change who he was. His office wasn't adorned with gleaming trophies or certificates. Instead, framed photos of his modest produce stand and a wall filled with thank you notes from local farmers hung proudly. His colleague Tara managed logistics, while Marcus focused on building genuine relationships. He had always avoided unnecessary drama and shunned overt displays of power, choosing instead to wield it quietly when needed. So when the gate agent at JFK scrutinized his face more than his boarding pass, and the security guard treated him like a potential threat rather than a valued customer, it wasn't merely an inconvenience. It was a stark reminder that no matter how many multi-million-dollar deals he sealed, or how many planes he helped outfit with fresh produce, some people only saw what they expected to see. When you don't match the preconceived image they have, they start inventing reasons to doubt you. Still, Marcus didn't need to shout to prove his worth. He had spent his life letting his actions speak for themselves. That one call at Gate 21 wasn't the start of a confrontation. It was his quiet way of signaling to the airline that they were on the brink of a very public mistake. The gate agent, whose name was Sierra, a woman in her early 30s, new on the job and eager to prove herself after a recent transfer from Atlanta to JFK, didn't know who Marcus Jennings was. To her, he was simply another name on a boarding pass. His face wasn't one she recognized, so she decided he didn't belong in her boarding lane. Sierra had rigid instructions: maintain order, adhere strictly to protocol, and never allow anyone to bend the rules. But what she lacked was the intuition that comes with experience. Nearby, a man in a navy windbreaker with a Bluetooth headset paced, and a woman with a floral carry-on watched the unfolding scene with growing interest. Sierra adjusted the microphone on her collar and muttered something into her earpiece about needing backup. Her colleague, Lisa, who had stepped in from across the desk, whispered, "Is there really an issue here? He's clearly first class." Sierra frowned. "It just doesn't feel right." Lisa's expression shifted imperceptibly. "Not dramatically, just enough to warn you. Be cautious." But Sierra was too absorbed by her screen, pretending to search for a booking note that simply wasn't there. Meanwhile, the security officer stood with crossed arms, his eyes intermittently shifting toward Marcus, without offering any clear explanation. As more passengers began to line up, Sierra grew increasingly nervous. Then Marcus's phone rang. He moved a few feet away from the desk to take it. Tara's voice was steady on the other end. "Okay, I've alerted their regional VP and looped in Derek Green, the head of food service integration over at Skylink." "Thanks." Marcus murmured his thanks, hung up, and slipped his phone back into his pocket, still holding his boarding pass. He waited impassively, as if preparing for a change of scenery rather than an ordeal at the gate. Back at the desk, Lisa's unease mounted. "Do you know who he is?" she whispered to Sierra. "That's Marcus Jennings. I saw his company name on our vendor list last week. He owns Jennings Global Provisions, and we're working with them on that new produce deal." Sierra's stomach churned as the gravity of the situation sank in. Before Lisa could continue, Sierra's earpiece crackled with the voice of a supervisor. "Sierra, I need a status update on the hold at Gate 21. We're showing a delay flag." Sierra froze. This was meant to be a minor passenger issue, yet it now threatened to affect high-level operations. After all, executives from corporate were on a flight this morning. No surprises allowed. Sierra fumbled with her earpiece, trying to steady her trembling hands. She glanced at Marcus, who stood still, his boarding pass still in hand, his expression calm and unreadable. Just then, a voice came through the earpiece. "Sierra, this is Supervisor Reynolds. Get me a status. What's causing the hold?" Sierra's voice wavered before she replied that it was a routine security check. The supervisor's tone left little room for doubt. "Ensure that it is indeed under control," because corporate executives were on board, and every minute counted. Marcus, meanwhile, took a slow step toward the glass wall overlooking the runway. He was no longer in the boarding lane, but a silent observer, his hands folded calmly behind his back as he watched luggage carts trundle past. He wasn't in a hurry. His boarding pass remained clutched in his hand as if it were a symbol of his quiet authority. Within moments, a man in a navy suit with a Skylink Air ID badge strode purposefully toward the gate, trailed by a sharply dressed woman with red heels, whose phone remained pressed to her ear. This was Elena Morales, the executive director of regional operations, who had just wrapped up a quarterly operations review when her desk phone rang urgently. Answering the call, she quickly surveyed the scene at Gate 21. "Mr. Jennings, may I speak with you privately?" she asked with calm authority. Marcus nodded once and slipped his phone back into his pocket. They stepped a few feet away, leaving Sierra standing frozen behind the gate desk. Elena continued, "On behalf of Skylink Air, I want to apologize. I've already contacted our internal team to investigate the situation. This should not have happened. Allow me to escort you onto the flight." Marcus's voice was measured as he inquired, "Do you know what seat I was assigned?" Checking her tablet, Elena responded, "Seat 1A. A faint smile touched his lips as he added, "First row. Interesting. I was under the impression that this lane was reserved for premium passengers only." Elena didn't blink. "Again, I apologize, Mr. Jennings." Marcus leaned in slightly. "The issue isn't the mistake, Ms. Morales. It's the assumption behind it," he said quietly, his tone revealing more than mere business decorum. It spoke of years of being underestimated. Elena swallowed hard. "Understood," she murmured. At that moment, Derek Green, Skylink Air's legal liaison for East Coast operations, with sandy hair and a demeanor of corporate confidence, approached and extended his hand. "Mr. Jennings, I'd like to apologize personally. I understand this experience has been unacceptable," he offered. Marcus gently cut him off. "I'm not here for apologies, Mr. Green. I need you to explain how such an incident occurred after we signed a U.S. $48 million deal." Derek paused, clearly at a loss for words. Elena interjected firmly, "Mr. Jennings, we are reviewing staff conduct and sensitivity training procedures. I assure you, this is not a reflection of Skylink Air's values." Marcus raised an eyebrow. "You mean it's not a reflection of the company's values? Or is it not a reflection of your gate agent's judgment?" Elena offered no immediate reply and gestured toward Sierra, who now looked as if she might vanish behind the desk under the weight of shame. Elena continued, "We are prepared to issue a formal apology, either privately or publicly, if you so wish." Marcus's expression remained unchanged. "I'm not here for a public apology. What I need is for you to do better. Because when a paying customer is treated like a security risk for simply having a first-class ticket, it damages your brand, literally." Without ceremony, Marcus reached into his leather briefcase and pulled out a thin manila folder. "This folder contains a signed copy of our contract. My company now supplies every fresh item on your West Coast and Midwest routes, including the premium lounge services." He handed it to Elena, whose expression grew solemn. "I don't want a tweet or a press release. I want concrete improvements. Because if you continue to treat any customer as if they don't belong, the consequences could extend far beyond this gate." Nearby murmurs began among the passengers. A woman in the business class lane discreetly recorded the unfolding drama, while others exchanged uneasy glances. Meanwhile, Elena signaled to the flight crew, and slowly the blockade at Gate 21 began to lift. Marcus was then escorted down the jet bridge with Derek shadowing him discreetly. Back at the gate, Lisa leaned toward Sierra. "You really don't get it," she murmured in a low tone. "That man's company puts food on half the trays they serve in first class." Sierra said nothing. The real lesson, as Lisa knew, wasn't in the conversation. They would later learn that the incident at Gate 21 would spark discussions about silent leadership and the inherent biases in protocol. As Marcus boarded the plane, a flight attendant named Jordan approached him. "Mr. Jennings, if there's anything you need before takeoff, just let me know," Jordan said softly. Marcus offered no elaborate response. He simply took his seat in 1A, placed his water bottle on the table untouched, and exhaled slowly. It was not relief that he felt, but a controlled calm forged by decades of overcoming similar challenges. Outside, the terminal slowed to a crawl. Flight statuses were being updated as several Skylink departures faced delays, with vague explanations ranging from operational hold to technical processing. In truth, corporate had initiated a quiet review, pulling logs, staff notes, and internal communications to determine just how deep the error at Gate 21 ran. Inside a corporate office overlooking the tarmac and Manhattan skyline, Elena, now joined by legal, HR, and crisis management teams, prepared for the possibility of a public fallout. Gate logs, staff interviews, and internal communications were being scrutinized. Every employee who had interacted with Marcus Jennings that morning was being held accountable. No one openly admitted their mistakes, but it was clear that the flight would not depart until the full extent of the incident was understood. On board, Marcus sat with his eyes closed. He wasn't angry or flustered, only composed, with a quiet resignation that came from years of learning to downplay personal affronts. He thought back on his childhood in Springfield, on his mother, Darlene, and his father, Eugene, who had taught him the value of hard work and dignity despite life's hardships. Even now, he maintained that same measured grace. About 20 minutes later, an internal report reached Elena's desk. The only anomaly, a call made by the gate agent to security without any proper documentation, an action that alone was enough to demand personnel changes. By the time the flight began its push back, Sierra had been quietly removed from duty. A photo of Marcus Jennings standing calmly with his phone at the gate soon surfaced, captioned, "He didn't raise his voice. He didn't move," and yet the entire terminal listened. The plane touched down in San Francisco just after 1:15 p.m. local time. Marcus was among the last to disembark, taking his time while other passengers rushed to grab their luggage and catch rides. His phone remained silent until he was comfortably seated in the back of a black Lincoln en route to the Marriott, where the Global Agro-Sustainability Summit was already in progress. Notifications poured in from Skylink executives, a text from Tara regarding the legal team's draft letter, and even a link to a local news blog that had picked up on the JFK incident. Nothing viral, nothing explosive, just a quiet ripple among the right circles. Inside the conference ballroom, the atmosphere was vibrant. Marcus entered quietly at first, almost unnoticed. But as he moved toward the stage for his keynote, murmurs began. Attendees exchanged brief greetings, no mention of the airport drama, just business, as he preferred. 20 minutes later, he took the stage before a full room. His keynote wasn't a direct rebuke of what had occurred at Gate 21. Instead, it was a reflection on resilience in the food supply chain. He shared the story of a Kansas beet farmer whose near disaster due to one missed communication ultimately transformed the way his company managed its processes. Then, pausing, he looked out over the audience, a mix of business leaders, suppliers, academic researchers, and logistics experts, and said, "Sometimes the problem isn't the system. Sometimes it's the shortcuts we take in reading people." A moment of quiet applause followed, genuine, not thunderous, but real. After his speech, a man from a Seattle distribution firm approached him. "That remark about shortcuts, it hit me harder than I expected," the man said. Marcus smiled warmly and replied, "That's exactly where the rot begins, in the shortcuts." Back in New York, Elena Morales reviewed the internal audit report. Although Sierra's file had been flagged, Marcus hadn't demanded her termination, nor had he sought compensation. He hadn't even taken up the offer of a written, public apology. He didn't need to. Skylink Air's senior staff knew exactly what had transpired and how narrowly they had avoided greater fallout. In the ensuing weeks, the airline quietly announced a new partnership with a civil rights advisory group dedicated to workplace sensitivity and bias prevention. A few media outlets connected the dots, and Marcus Jennings was mentioned indirectly in a statement by a Skylink spokesperson. A subtle reminder that the work on bias and sensitivity was far from over. Marcus never commented publicly. He didn't post on social media or hold interviews. He simply returned to work. When Tara later asked if he wished to address the press after an inquiry from a major magazine, he simply said, "Tell them I'm busy feeding people." Weeks passed, then months, and yet the story lingered, not because it went viral, but because those who experienced it remembered it. Passengers who had been at the gate recounted the incident over dinner, and colleagues in the industry used the moment as an example of silent leadership. Skylink Air staff began to rethink protocols, pausing before calling security without clear cause. And somewhere in Ohio, a retired grocery worker named Darlene, recalling her younger days helping at the local market, saw the story online, smiled to herself, and whispered, "That's my boy." Sometimes the loudest statement you can make is to do nothing but let your actions speak.